Well, a picture is worth 1,000 words, so that was an excellent video. Really a wonderful presentation, and in fact, let's go have lunch. It's really an honor to be here today. I have to admit, I had cataract surgery this past week. I may be looking at you, and I may know you, or you may think I know you, but actually my eyesight is a little fuzzy. That's a getting old issue. This is the first time that I've been to Ferndale. My wife and I, Donna, we drove up this morning. Very lovely, lovely town. In fact, it reminds me of my hometown. I grew up on the eastern shore of Maryland, and a river right next to us. So a river culture and fishing and swimming and crabbing and things like that. And it was also, the name of the river is the Choptank. So it was a strong Native American influence as well. So it was kind of funny to come here and feel that hometown feeling, especially as we had breakfast at Al's Diner, which I highly recommend. Okay, good. Well, the program that was in the video was the program from February, the summit program in February in Korea. And it was similar to what we just had last month. But it was an amazing experience to go to another country and have an experience with different culture and language and the travel, etc. And in February, when I went, actually I had to quarantine. I had to quarantine for 10 days in a little hotel. It was just me in my little room, and they would deliver the meals to the door. And they would kind of knock on the door and then run away. So it was kind of an odd feeling. And of course, everybody was masked, as they were last month as well. So it's still a serious issue, there's no question. But the Koreans are dealing with it, and God willing, this will pass, hopefully soon. Well, I'm not able to read my notes here, which is interesting. The Universal Peace Federation, which has been alluded to, was founded in 2005 by Father and Mother Moon. We refer to them. And it has been extremely successful as an NGO, a non-government organization. So we're dealing with people to people, organization to organizations. Of course, some governments are involved. For example, you saw the president of Nigeria, His Excellency Buhari. I met somebody this morning from Nigeria. You were probably surprised to see your president. So it's been very successful. Mrs. Moon has established a number of associations that kind of target the various segments of society. You know, there's the media group, the women group, the youth group, the parliamentarian group, the religious faith group, and each of them are bona fide. They have a say in society, but they have their own particular agenda. So this is a good approach, an integrated approach. So we have all these voices, they each have their voice, and then we come together for these major summit programs. This program, I'm glad they had the video. That was good. So you have a sense, you have a feeling for what it was like to see all these people there, all these VIPs, and the color and the grandeur. But I want to put a little bit of meat on the bones for my presentation. We had easily 1,000 people there at the hotel alone. And from most of the nations that have diplomatic relations with the Koreas. It was just about a month ago, 5 weeks or so. And the theme was toward peace on the Korean Peninsula, toward a world culture of peace. Well, Korea is 5,000 miles away. You know, maybe you're wondering why in the world is Korea so important? But it is. It is very important, and it's a major trading partner to Washington State. It's a major ally to the United States, and but most importantly is that 70 so years ago, 40,000 Americans died in Korea during the Korean War. 40,000, and I know that there is a memorial here in Washington State. So we Korea has the blood of Americans as well as other countries as well. 16 nations stepped forward to defend South Korea from North Korea's invasion. So that's why we're doing this. And Mother Moon feels like, you know, you've heard the expression, we're in a new Cold War now. That's not an exaggeration. We have some serious issues. Our nation, our world is divided. So what we see in the Korean Peninsula, Mother Moon is trying to reconcile what's going on in the Korean Peninsula. It's like a microcosm of the world in a sense. Reconciling the peninsula, reconciling the world to build a culture of peace. We began the program with a special memorial service to the former Prime Minister of Japan, Mr. Abe. He was a towering man, well respected, in office for many years, and was a stabilizing effect for Japan and all of Northeast Asia, and a good friend of the United States. He was murdered. He was murdered. And maybe we'll be talking more about this, but in a nutshell, he was murdered because by someone who was disgruntled, who hated the UPF, who hated the Unification Church as the host. And so this man, this deranged man, murdered Mr. Abe to get at the Unification Church. Well, that's one thing, but what the media has done is twisted it around. Instead of blaming this one person, they're blaming the Unification Church. So maybe some of you have heard this story, but it's a major issue, and it's quite serious because it attacks the religious freedom, that a person can't go to a conference without fear of being shot. It makes no sense. So because Mr. Abe had spoken twice before by video to UPF, we thought it was natural, it was fair to have this tribute, few moments of tribute. Of course, the key issue is Korean reconciliation. Our ultimate goal is Korean reunification, but that's the next step. First, we have to deal with the issues between North and South Korea. And there are major issues of trade and health, and of course the divided families. There are thousands and thousands of families that were divided because of the war, and they have not been able to reconcile that. So before we talk about reunification, we have to deal with the reconciliation. These are top leaders. I mean, they may have some political baggage, there's no question, but they are respected, and they gave very serious comments, observations about the Korean Peninsula. The former Prime Minister of Canada, of course, Mr. Trump, and Newt Gingrich, these are truly experts. Harper, he didn't mince words. He said that the North Koreans don't want to come to the negotiating table. That's the reality. They don't want to come to the table. In fact, since January, North Korea has shot off more than 30 or 31 missiles, and now they're threatening to test a nuclear device. So he was saying, you know, we have to be open to negotiate or to deal with the North Koreans, but we also have to be realists. We have to keep our guard up. And Mr. Trump, he talked about the need for peace through strength. He talked about the need for a coalition, and which is why he reached out to Mr. Abe, who was the Prime Minister then, as well as President Moon, who was the leader of Korea. We need an international coalition to deal with the problem. And Mr. Gingrich, actually, I've met him a number of times. He's a very interesting man, very staunch conservative. He's very Catholic, and he loves Mother Moon and what we're doing. And the reason, if I can put it in my own words, is that, first of all, his father was a Korean War veteran. His father served in Korea. And when he was a child, his father came home from Korea after the war. And, of course, Korea was devastated. You have to understand it was an agricultural country. And what his father brought back was a wooden carving, a little wooden carving. And the carving was of a peasant that was walking alongside of a cart pulled by an ox. And in the cart were called honey barrels, honey barrels or honey buckets. Well, they weren't carrying honey. They were carrying excrement. So this peasant would go door to door to the rich people and collect their excrement. They didn't have indoor plumbing. And then he would take that out to the peasants, to the farms, and he would sell it. So this is how desperate these people were to make ends meet, to survive. And so Gingrich, he told us once, he's spoken a number of times, how this impacted his thinking, you know, what America was able to do for this country and what it is that people need to survive. It just made him who he is and his respect for his father. And he thought so many times, well, how would my father think if he came back to Korea today? The nation that he saw 70 years ago and the nation that it is today, which is the 4th largest economy in Asia and the 10th largest economy in the world. So it was a very artistic testimony that I'm grateful for Mr. Gingrich for sharing that from his heart. There was also a fact-finding tour hosted by the Washington Times. Again, their credentials speak for themselves. General Sharp, the commander of the UN ROK forces in Korea, Ambassador Harris, who was also a general, military person responsible for the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, and Dr. Mansurov, an expert. Again, each of them giving their perspectives. General Sharp speaking about the fact that the North Korean army, it's only 30 miles away from Seoul. The distance between Panmunjom, the 38th parallel, and Seoul is 30 miles. If a missile was launched, it would be seconds before landing. Seconds. And he talked about the various, the many spies that have crossed over. They've discovered tunnels. I've seen them. I think Mr. Downing, who spent many years over in Korea as well, you've seen these. They're big enough to have trucks drive through them. So the danger is so imminent, so real, so close. He also talked about the cyber warfare issue, that the North Koreans they have like 8,000 people dedicated as hackers whose goal is to break into computer systems, whether it's military or non-military, banks, hospitals, and then they ransom. They will turn off that system and then demand a certain amount of money. I just saw an article the other day about a hospital in Kansas. They paid $500,000 to have their computers back on. And I personally experienced it when I was a chaplain in Washington, D.C. The hospital there, it just froze one day because hackers had gotten in. Can you imagine a hospital not being able to access its computers if you're lying on an operating table and they can't see your records? So the hospital immediately paid it, and it was done with. But they have no choice, and they still haven't been able, the government still hasn't been able to really break through and stop that kind of hacking. And Dr. Mansurov, he's actually from Russia. He studied in North Korea, and he has deep insight into the Korean situation of how various powers are working to break our alliance. He says, most importantly, we have to maintain our strong alliance of the Western countries. And he also talked about China and the Chinese expansionism in the South China Sea. I guess this sounds like a university course that I'm giving here, you know, an intensive 3-day program, which is covering six weeks of information. But that's what it was like. So much information to absorb. But the issue of the Chinese in the South China Sea is very real. They're building islands in the middle of nowhere on top of reefs and then claiming 12-mile territorial rights in all directions as well as vertically. So soon you won't, U.S. ships or Australian ships won't be able to go near these islands without the permission of the Chinese. So it's very serious now and for the near future. We also had a large group from Africa. This was really special. Religious and youth leaders were there, and this came about because in 2018, Mother Moon went to Senegal and met with the president of Senegal, His name is Macky Sall. And Africa is a huge continent. It's like 1/4 of the world. And yet the population there is very young. The median age of Africa is 19. 19. The median age for the United States is 38. So it's a very young population. Mother Moon met with him, and they talked about the issues of the youth, the employment, families, character education, and they really had a wonderful meeting of the minds. And so Macky Sall was very happy to, through his office, to invite people to come to the event. Also, we had, and then Mother Moon in 2019 went to Niger. These are both former French colonies. They're both Muslim countries too, interestingly. And the leader of Niger, he is currently the president or the executor of an organization of the northern countries of Africa. And the northern countries have the problems of desertification. This is where the Sahara Desert is and the Sahel. So the desert is slowly going south. And so they talked about a program to build a forest going from coast to coast. It's about 4,000 miles of trees, and this to hopefully stop the expansion of the desert going south. And so climate change, water harvesting, jobs, these were all discussed by the African group. So that was very fascinating to have Africa there. And then we had a session on religious freedom, what I alluded to earlier from Mr. Abe. These are two persons from Japan. Mr. Kondo, he's a lawyer, and he talked about the more than 4,000 cases of unificationists who have been kidnapped or beaten, sometimes raped, all because certain people didn't like what church they wanted to go to. So it's a major religious freedom issue that's at stake. And then Mr. Goto on the right, he was in prison for 12 years by his own family. And you can see a picture of him in the middle, that he was almost starved to death, only because Mr. Goto wanted to go to the Unification Church and his family did not want him to go there. This is Mr. Pompeo. He is the former head of Secretary of State. He's a remarkable guy too. His father was also a Korean War veteran. That's interesting, isn't it? That somehow they pass that on to their children, the sense of responsibility, desire to help other people, just to make a difference, and this connection to Korea. And so this quote kind of blows me away, because he's saying that the very enemies of the United States, our enemies, Russia, China, North Korea, Iran, they are the very nations that repress religious freedom in their countries. Enemies of America, enemies of the democracy, are the ones that deny religious freedom to their own citizens. It was also the Little Angels' 60th anniversary. That's very nice, and especially if you've seen them before, they're beautiful. It's a dancing school for young girls. And to imagine 60 years ago, Korea was, 1962, was only 9 years after the war. You know, a war that devastated that country. And here's Father and Mother Moon, you know, where most people are worried just about putting food on the table, they're thinking about preserving the culture, the 6,000-year culture of Korea. So it's pretty remarkable contribution to Korean society. And in the backdrop this was actually the 10th anniversary of Father Moon's passing. So there was a program, a memorial service program at a stadium outside of Seoul with more than 25,000 people. So that was really memorable to honor this person who has dedicated his entire life to world peace. And what's very interesting is that each year since his passing, North Korea has sent condolence messages. The bouquet of flowers. One year, I think they sent some dogs, even. Some dogs. Anyway, the point is that, yes, there's a lot of friction, a lot of conflict between these two countries. And yes, the world is wondering what in the world can we do to solve this. Is it going to be, I really enjoyed Pastor Neville's prayer this morning. Is it going to be through politics? Is it going to be through economics, diplomacy? What is it going to take to bring the North Koreans to the table? What will it bring to bring some friendship, sense of friendship between this peninsula? And I think there it is right there. It's a blood relationship between North and South based upon love. So it's interesting because Reverend Moon was ideologically a complete opposite. He was a theist. He believes in God. And North Koreans do not believe in God. It's an atheist country. And yet they put aside that ideology because they're both Koreans. So that's, I think, what's going to bring people to the table. It's going to bring peace. There's an invitation to Mother Moon to go to North Korea. And when the time is right, she will go. And it will be a major push forward for this whole issue towards reconciliation and towards reunification. When Reverend Moon talks about the principles of unification, he says that North and South Korea cannot become one with guns and swords. They have to follow a foundation based on the heart that honors God. So these are the basic principles of what have guided Reverend Moon's thinking. We can do many, many programs, but it's going to come down to true love. And that's going to be the model for the rest of the world as well. So these principles of peace, which are on your program, thank you, Mr. Krishnak, for putting that there. I think it's really important that we kind of capture that, because that's the outline, that's the paradigm that we need to carry in our hearts of how to live. I mean, we can talk about world peace out the kazoo, but we have to have peace here in our own hearts as individuals, as families, as a nation, and then we can have peace in the world. We are one family under God. This is, for me, this is so important because what it's saying is that we need to have a common vision. Our community here in Ferndale, we need to have a common vision among our citizens. We need to have a desire to have people have peace, safety, good health. People need to believe that that everybody wants the same thing for our city. So it's calling us all to be good citizens, to work together. And the higher qualities of human beings are spiritual and moral. So I think a community of peace requires a collaboration between our elected officials and our faith leaders. They need to be working together. Faith leaders need to be able to be a compass, a moral compass, to help the elected officials make these tough decisions that are needed. And interestingly, the African group, that was one of their proposals, that they create an interfaith council that would be inside of the African Union. So African Union has 54 nations, so you have 54 ambassadors, but then you would also have 54 religious leaders or representing traditional faiths as well. The family is the cornerstone of world peace. Well, that's an easy one. A community of peace has to be based upon families. Families as the school of love, where we learn love, where we practice it about vertical love as we understand our parents, a horizontal love as we deal with our siblings. This is where we learn the value of each other, just because we're family. Living for the sake of others, that we are interdependent, that we need each other. We cannot gain happiness or peace by myself. I need my brother and my sister. And we need to practice the golden rule, to treat others as we would like to be treated. Kindness. Just last week, actually, Pope Francis spoke in Kazakhstan at an interfaith conference, and I really recommend reading that or Googling it. because he gave some wonderful points. But the one that right at the very beginning that touched me immediately was that he said the meaning of life is linked to our relationship with others. Fraternity is part of our identity. We mature only with others and thanks to others. So I think that really captures, the Pope really captures our relationship of who we are as people and who we are as we need one another, living for the sake of others. And then lastly, that peace comes through overcoming the boundaries of ethnicity. There are universal moral principles that give us the common ground to promote reconciliation and to appreciate the virtues of other people's points of views, or the virtues of other religions or other ideologies. We need to be able to open ourselves and not just cut off because they're different from us. So UPF and our founders, we very happily join together with the Pope as well, calling for the building of a culture of peace, and as well as for building, engendering this spirit of one family under God. That's what UPF is all about. And this program this past month was so beautiful because all these people gathered together with that common vision. We want to build world peace, and we know that we need each other, whether it's a country in Africa or in Asia or here. We all need one another. We cannot exist by ourselves. So I was very happy to participate and be involved with that, and I wish you all well, and God bless Ferndale. Thank you.